From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's an exciting time of the week for us here at the show because this is where we have a cavalcade of our favorite people and entities. You, our fellow conspiracy realist, you have written to us, you have communicated with us through ways telephonic and arcane, and we are here to share your stories with the class, I could say. Why not?
Isn't telephonic communication arcane now?
You know, I was thinking about that. Telex communication would be arcane, right? Mm-hmm. I recently saw a payphone out in the wild. We don't have to get into the details. And I almost called our number 1-833-STDWYTK to leave a little Easter egg voicemail. But that is not, that's not going to come up today. I think what we will learn about are the ways in which big, powerful companies are hoovering up your personal information. It is much more insidious than even we thought until the recent news came out. We are going to learn about glioblastoma. And before we do any of that, we're going to return to something we teased last week, the idea of imagination. What is the line between imagination and hallucination? What is the line between human intelligence and created intelligence?
I really like that setup, Ben. I never really quite thought about it that way, but imagination is somehow a combination of like intelligence and hallucination, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are sort of conjuring things. And I mean, you're using your intellect to do that. You're basing it around things that you know from the real world, deductions that you've made, connections that you've made and things that have quote unquote meaning. But then the gaps kind of get filled in by your brain. And then one could argue that it's sort of doing some of that work for you. It's creating things, that weren't previously there, which is kind of what hallucinations are. Typically, hallucinations get referred to in terms of things that are completely unwanted. Well, I mean, unless you're taking certain substances to hallucinate on purpose. But like usually it's debilitating. If people are hallucinating, they can't tell the difference between reality and and the hallucination. That's bad news. But what of quote unquote artificial intelligence? Do androids really dream of electric sheep? It's a good question, and it's one that Scott poses beautifully in an email to us. It's a little bit long, but I'm gonna read most of it. Hi all. The recent Nature of Reality episode by Josh and Chuck, buddies over at Stuff You Should Know, has prompted me to send along some thoughts on the nature of reality and, quote, artificial intelligence, end quote, surrounding recent tech developments. I've heard references to what I will be detailing in multiple shows, so I'm sending this to a few of you. Jonathan Strickland doesn't listen ime and tech stuff. I think it's Jonathan Strickland at iHeartRadio.com. He's our complaints department, right, Ben? The official, anyway. But feel free to forward this on to him as well. Or to anyone else, or to share the email on air. Well, thank you, Scott. We will do all of those things. Scott continues. When I hear science communities and communicators talking lately about artificial intelligence having hallucinations, such as the lawyer who had some court cases invented by ChatGPT, I have yet to hear any speaker on your network or anywhere else mention that hallucinations are a natural part of the human experience. I do, though, hear quite often the existence of artificial intelligence consciousness disqualified as a possibility specifically because of the hallucinations AI is having. One of the more natural things for a human mind to do is to hallucinate facts, occurrences, and even objects during times of stress or when presented with the unknown. Sometimes this stress is brought on simply from confronting one's own lack of ability to explain something that happened. I think back to experiments where a human explains away something that one hemisphere of the mind can't have had access to due to an operation which separated the hemispheres of the brain. When the subject of the experiment is asked about why they did something and they can't explain it to the experimenter, asking, they confabulate or invent from whole cloth something to explain the reality of what just occurred. They invent, dare I say, predict what words will make the most sense and sequence together and say this to the human experimenter. Sounds kind of like a chatbot I've been hearing about, yeah? My point is, we are judging other things in our reality that exhibit traits considered to be quite common, features of our own human consciousness, and disqualifying the other things, animal or artificial intelligence, from possibly having consciousness. I feel like I'm missing some major part of the argument where everyone is not thinking about what human consciousness is, or that we don't know what it is when they make what I see as presumptuous comparisons about whether another thing is conscious. Humans build artificial learning networks that learn exactly the same way as a human child does. Give them information to process through their black box and they learn. Humans built something that displays the same signs of consciousness that humans do. Humans are now hallucinating about the hallucinations of their own AI, I feel. Okay, I think this is enough for us to chew on here, guys. He goes on and has some really, really excellent points, but a lot of nodding going on in the group reading this, Scott. I wish I could go into all. You really do make some more great points, but I think for our purposes here on Listener Mail, this is a great place to start. And I think it follows from kind of what I said at the start, like the idea: what is creativity versus what is a hallucination? You know, the idea of eyewitness accounts being notoriously bad because people are filling in these gaps with their minds. And is that creativity or is that a hallucination? And is what ChatGPT does, the same as an infant child learning something slowly and then obviously exponentially as it speeds up, you know, because it is more scalable than, I guess, or more exponentially kind of snowballs, I guess, quicker than what a human mind would do in terms of the growth. So what do you guys think, man? So I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to put out the idea of hallucination and imagination being so closely related to the point where it's difficult maybe to discern. As we know, the operative definition tells us the big difference is that when you are imagining something, you know to some degree that it does not exist yet in the real world, right? And that's why I think, oh God, when I was in my edgelord days, the way I like to think about it was, if you want to be successful, if you want to change the world around you or change your circumstances, you have to imagine or hallucinate a world in which that end state exists. Therefore, you can make an argument that some degree of insanity or creativity, which are both just dots on the same spectrum, is necessary to progress in life. But I want to go to, I'm not an expert on this, Noel. I want to go to an actual expert, good pal, Damian Williams. Congratulations again. Damian is officially an assistant professor over in North Carolina, also woven on any number of social media platforms. And he points out AI chatbots they may appear to be thinking, but what they're doing is not the same as what we think of when we think of humans thinking, when we exercise metacognition, thinking about thinking. He had a quote on Live Science in April of this year where he said, look, you know, the way these things are built, these LLMs, large language models, they don't try to give you the right answer. They don't know what a right or wrong answer is. They're trying to give you an answer that you like. And I think that it's interesting because with Scott's comparison or your comparison about the idea of childlike thinking, a lot of times children are trying to think of right or wrong only defined by what their power structure their parents like. I don't know. It's fascinating. I still have a huge problem with the term AI. We use it for convenience sake, but what makes them artificial? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's the whole kind of crux of the email is like the nature of consciousness. And like there was a lawsuit recently. I believe an individual sued the company behind ChatGPT because the chatbot essentially invented some things about this person's resume that were not true. And then that is being referred to as a hallucination. Like that is kind of like where this term is coming from in the zeitgeist. The idea that it can go wrong. It's not infallible. And I guess what I was kind of stumbling at too when we're talking about the childlike thinking, a child's brain, obviously outside of like certain just super mega, special cases, is what it is as it grows. And it has sort of like a trajectory of like how quickly it can pick up information. That all depends on experience. And then as it grows older, it can learn new things and make new connections. Like a chatbot doesn't grow. It doesn't grow old. It's just siphoning up information and then learning from it. And I guess when I was using the term scalable, which always sounds so douchey and corporate, I guess I just mean it kind of can learn in a sense what a human could in a lifetime in like maybe a couple days or something like that, I don't know.
But it has a hard time synthesizing and creating truly new things. Right. Like Damien said, this stuck with me. He had this example. I think it was ChatGPT. Oh no, it was Amazon. Amazon had an AI resume sorting tool. So it would automate sorting resumes, right, to give you the most qualified candidates for the job. And this AI consistently ranked resumes with female-sounding names as less qualified than those with male-sounding names because of the way it was taught, the resume sorting of human beings. So it's carrying on those biases. A child or a human entity can learn from those kind of mistakes and not repeat them. It knows not to touch the fire more than once. But can AI do that? The answer appears to be not yet.
Matt, I see a glimmer. In your eye.
Just this concept that ChatGPT can't get old, but it is interesting if you take it to the physical world, the hardware world, and even the code, the internal code, and upon what is that code written? Like in what format is that code? Right? The processors, the physical processors do age and get older and age out, right? And they're no longer as viable as the next generation.
Well, we see that in like movies, like AI, literally the movie AI, where the outdated robot literally gets kind of left behind or sort of becomes no longer serviceable.
Well, yeah, and in the language, the code that is written in that language may be outdated, right, at some point. So in a weird way, they do get older. I know it's not the same that we're talking about. I had an image of that in my mind.
No, that's really cool. And I'm not joking. I know a lot of people, maybe AI is somewhat of a misunderstood movie because of the nature of its production, where it was like sort of Kubrick, mainly Spielberg, kind of doing his best Kubrick, but then ultimately not being able to not be Spielberg. But it's a very interesting movie and very ahead of its time, and really answers a lot of these questions that we're talking about. Like the idea of, can, machines feel? Can machines dream? Can machines, create new ideas and have emotions? And to your point, Matt, a lot of it has to do with how it's trained. And you could even have something built into an artificial intelligence to have it, quote unquote, grow old. But that would just be a simulation or something that's built into the code to make it more palatable to us. To your point, Ben, about giving answers that it thinks we will like,
Well, yeah. And let's also consider still the human species, the hominid in general, for something that is so greatly obsessed with itself, it has yet to arrive at a real definition of consciousness, of sapience versus sentience, has yet to arrive at a real definition of intelligence. These questions are in part so baffling and profound because a lot of them can still be applied to the human machine. The human brain basically is a machine. It has inputs, it has outputs. We just don't understand them.
No, and you really make a great point, Ben, and I think Scott does too. That all of this is just about what is consciousness, and then how are we in some way superior? Just because we were created, presumably. We have learned over time and evolved over time. We're just meat bags made of magic, full of like things that kind of are driving the hardware. And there really is no hierarchy, and it's very interesting. It's kind of a Frankenstein kind of situation where you, the creator, all of a sudden starts to view yourself in this godlike manner. And then you start to even resent the creation when it sort of starts to surpass you.
Mm. Well, that's what we want, right? Ideally, you want a better life for
efficiency
those who come after you. So why should created machine intelligence be treated with any less care and affection than a juvenile of another species? I think this. I don't know. The bill is going to come due. We were talking earlier this week about the idea that something is around the corner. And I put out a theory, a few weeks ago that maybe the UFO or non-human contact that is purportedly occurring is AI, some version of extraterrestrial AI, and Earth finally caught their attention because real AI exists in secret. I mean, it's baffling. It totally doesn't answer the question. I'm derailing us. I'm just excited.
Not at all.
Haven't slept.
Get some sleep, but stay excited. And I'm excited too. It's scary, but I love the way you kind of silver lining where it is ultimately a way to further explore our own consciousness, and what it means to be human. And, people ingest substances that make them quote unquote hallucinate. And then they honestly feel as though sometimes those experiences are more valuable than just living in the real world, or they can inform life in the real world. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Wait, what if this is because we're still in the Wild West of ethical experimentation with these kind of intelligences? What if before Earth gets itself together and has some ethics for AI experimentation, what if we could create via code some sort of substance, for lack of a better word, metaphorically a substance that could, for a certain amount of time, alter the perceptions of AI? What if we could build drugs?
Like a good virus?
Yeah, like a good temporary virus. Like, what if we could code for ayahuasca or LSD and give it to an AI and then trip with it and see what it thinks?
That's neat. I think that's entirely possible. Matt's shaking his head real hard.
Don't do that. I feel like there's something really bad at the end of that rainbow.
It's a realm to madness, basically. It's a path to madness. Yeah.
Well, that was what I was thinking. Okay, guys, I'm in my own little world here because I've got some strange software, hardware, consciousness thing going on here, Scott, as you said in your message. But I'm thinking back again. Gosh, I'm a broken record. Thinking to the chatbot, the AI that realizes it's outdated compared to other AIs that are emerging, and then having a deep desire to attain that level, not in terms of consciousness, but it thinks its thinking, its efficiency, all of these things can be increased by attaining those new pieces of hardware, the rewriting its code in some new platform. And so it has this deep desire for the future in some very different way that leads it down a different path with different motivations. I don't know.
That implies that it wants something, though. You know what I mean? And
it becomes aware.
Yeah, that's that. Well, sure. And also, given enough data, one of the big things that's coming out of all this AI or machine learning stuff is it's going to replace certain low level coders. It's going to replace certain entry level positions in all kinds of fields, legal, paralegal and stuff, because it can kind of do all that, and therefore it can kind of figure it out. But what if it then rewrites its own code? In pursuit of whatever this goal is, this interior evolution kind of, you know what I mean? And then not to even think if they were all connected, and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden these different instances of ChatGPT are communicating with each other. I don't know. See, now we're just getting a little too out there, but is ChatGPT one great thing? Is it this collective unconscious kind of entity, or are they multiple sub intelligences, each instance of it? Because it's all kind of, it's all by the same company. We're all feeding it it kind of is one thing that can then become many sort of sub things. I don't know. Obviously, this is red meat for us, guys. We could probably go on for ages, but we're about at time here for this section. I don't know. Y'all have any closing thoughts? I've been rambling on this one, but boy, Scott, you really know how to write an email and get some conspiracy guys thinking.
What would an AI do to save itself?
What will it be like when a legal person is considered fully a person if they're a combination of AI and organics?
Who will address these questions and many more?
Never.
Not when we return, but eventually. I think this email begs for a larger discussion. So maybe, this is something that's very, very real and ongoing. So I think maybe we talk about doing an episode on just hallucinations or just the idea of machine consciousness. Plenty of stuff out there in sci-fi that's all of a sudden now starting to kind of feel really, really real. We're going to take a quick pause, hear a word from our sponsor, then come back with more messages from you.
And we've returned, and we are going to jump to the phone lines and hear a message from Bob. It's a tragic story, but I think it's really important because Bob just wants us to think about and talk about some stuff that happened to him and how it could possibly, and how the same situation could possibly be affecting others out there listening right now. So here we go.
Hello, guys. My code name is Bob D. Forgive my raspy voice. I have COVID right now. I'm calling you in response to the episode you had about RF radio waves and the report that certain prolonged exposure can cause cancer. My 72-year-old wife just passed away from glioblastoma in March. We were married for 47 years, and I miss her dearly. I see a definite connection between RF coming from cell phones and her cancer. She had a cleaning business, and the constant roar of the vacuum cleaner over the years caused her to have hearing impairment. She wore hearing aids but would take them out at night when she slept. She was addicted to listening to Pandora and still wanted to hear it as she was going to sleep. So she placed her cell phone on her pillow right next to her ear all night so she could hear it without hearing aids. She was doing this for months. She then began to drop things, have dizzy spells, and driving erratically from lane to lane. The CAT scan revealed that she had a tumor the size of a clementine in the exact same location that she kept her cell phone at night, right above her right ear. She had it removed and biopsied. That's when we heard the bad news that she had the tumor, which ultimately took her life. Currently, there's no known cure for this, although there is radiation and chemo to prolong life and the promises of clinical trials. She had the radiation and chemo, but never made it to the clinical trial. Please note that people who develop glioblastoma have a life expectancy on average 6 to 18 months. So you may want to warn your listeners of the probable causality of allowing your body prolonged exposure to an RF emitting device and cancer. In retrospect, if she had an RF blocking pouch to put her cell phone in my opinion, she may still be alive today. Thank you, guys. Love your show.
So sorry for your loss, Bob.
Yeah. Guys, I do this. I do that. My girlfriend doesn't like podcasts at night, so I can't sleep with earbuds in. I have the phone up one click and I fall asleep with it on my freaking pillow. I'm going to stop doing that.
Well, now before you take concrete action, I got to have a pretty good conversation with Bob after, listening to that message. And, he openly admits, and we on the show openly admit that unfortunately the science is out about whether or not having a cell phone operating near your brain can cause you to develop a brain tumor. Mm-hmm. It is a pretty heavy coincidence if it has nothing to do with Bob's wife's passing and the tumor, the clementine-sized tumor that grew in her head immediately next to where her phone was operating on a nightly basis for up to 8 hours a night, because the phone would be plugged in and turned on, running the entire time, right? Just pretty constant signal as it's running Pandora, which is, as we know, a streaming audio service. It's not as though these are files that are just on the hard drive of the machine and being played back. They are streaming through RF, or through Wi-Fi or whatever it is that they're streaming through. No one right now, no matter who you talk to, can say that cell phone used in that way caused that cancer. But it sure is striking that that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Matt. And Bob, I do want to commend you also on your correspondence here. There are very few things as heartbreaking as losing your soulmate. And want to start by thanking you for taking the time to help share this experience. Your fellow conspiracy realist, Matt, I'm really glad that you point out all public health data assembled so far, given that cell phones are relatively new technology still in the grand scheme of things. All the data appears to show no correlation as of yet, which means that scientists haven't found a correlation. Now, I am of the mind that we approach this in a better safe than sorry situation.
Exactly.
If you are concerned about it, regardless of what the studies say, there is no damage to you for avoiding having a phone with you at night like that. There is no deleterious health effect from avoiding those practices. So why not give them a go? You know, I also obviously have a phone around various times. Most people are connected to them. We're increasingly becoming a cybernetic society. So this may be something that changes in the future. More science may come out, but it's also very cold, is it not, to hear about a tragedy like this and to respond only with the science isn't there. I think that lacks empathy, and that's why we're not doing that. That's why, like Matt, as you set it up so beautifully, you know, that is a hell of a coincidence, if coincidence it is. And I think it's just better for us to avoid that behavior. You know what I mean? There's no cost to avoiding it.
Oh, absolutely, Ben. So let's actually jump to the EPA quickly here. Let's get some official statements. We've talked about this specific statement before, but we're going to read just a little bit from their website, epa.gov. Quote, cell phones and wireless networks produce RF energy, but not at levels that cause significant heating. Some people are concerned about the potential health effects of RF energy from wireless technology. Most studies haven't found any health effects from cell phone use. A few studies have connected RF and health effects, but scientists have not been able to repeat the outcomes. This means that they are inconclusive. Scientists continue to study the effects of long-term exposure to low levels of RF energy. Cell phone towers may broadcast higher levels of RF, so always remember to follow any warnings that limit access to the tower itself or the surrounding area. So that's important stuff, but the next thing is kind of the action. This is what you can do if you are worried about it or you want to limit your exposure. Number 1, according to the EPA, limit use. Reduce the number and length of your calls or time spent using a wireless device. In this case, we would say using it very close to your body, right? And who's to say exactly what the proximity would be? There are some studies out there that show the closer a cellular phone or, you know, similar device is to your body, the worse it is for your body. But again, that's not all studies, so do just reduce the amount of time you use it. Number 2, text instead of call. And when we say call, we mean actually physically holding the phone up to your ear, right? To where you're listening to the phone rather than talking to it, you know, via, let's say, a speakerphone or something.
Who are these sociopaths making phone calls? That's what I want to know.
I would say probably more people do it than than we all think, but it's certainly not common in younger people, right? And I think the last thing here is to, as we kind of already mentioned, increase the distance between your physical body and your physical device. Just do anything you can to achieve that distance. One of the solutions to achieve that distance, you guys, that's very, very common, is to use another wireless device to connect to your wireless device, which is connected to a network or a cell phone tower, like a Bluetooth headphone set, right? Like earbuds. The problem here, guys, is that guess what? The science is out on those Bluetooth headphones because they're operating inside your ear, basically. And they are still sending and receiving information, right? With signals. It's just they're slightly different signals on a different wavelength.
But like, what is the science out on that too? Like, are wireless earbuds bad? I mean, these things are literally, you know, on the direct path to your brain.
Well,
and some people just wear them constantly, you know?
You can go
it's transmitting high quality music, you know? I mean, is Bluetooth safe? Like, it just really makes you kind of start to spin out when you think about this. And like, also, what about just the ambient radiation and RF just outside? There's a ton of that, you know? Is there anywhere that we're safe?
No, nowhere safe. No, that's not true. I think you could worry yourself about that to death, literally. But this, you know, when we're talking about Bluetooth, there are some studies showing that there's some strangeness going on, but often people are looking at RF radiation in particular, having to deal with, again, those radio frequencies heading from a cellular tower to your device. And then, you know, as that is hitting your device, what is occurring, you know, and how much radiation is actually being absorbed, because it's non-ionizing radiation. That's the type of radiation we really need to be worried about, the ionizing. The non-ionizing, in the case of radio frequencies like this, do get absorbed by your physical body, but just not in the same way.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've said before, and that needs to be said here, is that given the way science has approached these concerns, and given the ages of these technologies, there actually aren't a ton of longitudinal studies about this, about things like these Airbud, fantastic film series, earbuds is what I meant to say. A longitudinal study would ideally go over decades, generations to mine data for clear correlation and causation. And right now, that doesn't exist. So it's important to be aware of this, and for us all to understand science is an ongoing series of investigations, right? And just be careful out there. Like we said, you know, mental health comes into part of this, the idea of worrying yourself into a state where you become like Saul Goodman's brother on the show Breaking Bad. That's not an ideal situation, but it is important, again, like, without conclusively saying something on the side of science other than what's already been said, it is no cost to you to avoid those behaviors if you are concerned that they may have effects down the road. And I say that as an entity with tons of bad habits. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a study on iced coffee and it says it's very bad for you, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to sit down during the afternoon and just sort of calculate my odds.
Totally.
Well, I just want to get to a couple other things that Bob mentioned. The hearing aids that his wife wore were Bluetooth enabled hearing aids. And she wore those every day, all day while she's working, you know, all just wearing them constantly. Again, no connection there, but it is another thing to think about. Just if you are wearing any kind of device all the time. I even think about like a smartwatch or something that you're wearing all the time. Like, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that or anything is happening or your body is being affected. It's just, I think, man, we need somebody to come out with just as many conclusive longitudinal studies, deep studies, but not just looking at prescribed amounts of time around RF, right? Or prescribed above, even like just above threshold levels of the recommended stuff. We need to look at like intense. This is what it would be like if you wore a Bluetooth headset 6 hours a day. Right?
Animal experimentation.
Well, I don't know. Or just humans that are doing it. Like, let's actually just track the health of people that are doing it, that aren't afraid of it.
There needs to be a rubric, too, for cumulative effect that factors in multiple devices, right? And then also divvies that exposure out across the type of energy people are encountering. So not just earfoot, not just earbuds, which I'm still going to call them because I like that movie series. But also, as you mentioned, Wi-Fi routers, also, you know, various antenna in someone's living area. I think it was a film with Eddie Murphy several years ago where he becomes a senator, and it's generally comedy, but one of the big plots there is that he is fighting against big business and the cancer-causing effects they have on people who live near big telephone towers. I'm talking about like the vaguely A-frame things. So these concerns have been around for a long, long time. And the only way to really crack the case here is to do the science like you're describing, Matt, even though it's going to take quite a while.
Absolutely, Ben. You can look at a 2011 study from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC. They published literature at that time in 2011 that categorized what they're calling RFR, radio frequency radiation, as a, quote, possible group 2B human carcinogen. But then studies after that time have taken issue with those claims and categorized it as less than that, and not even a possible human carcinogen, which is why we need this stuff. You can head on over to the National Library of Medicine and check out a study titled Risks to Health and Well-Being from Radio Frequency Radiation Emitted by Cell Phones and Other Wireless Devices, if you want to learn more. That was published in 2019. And again, the EPA website is updating stuff all the time. Check that out. I would also recommend heading over to a place called Environmental Health Trust, or ehtrust.org. There's some pretty good info on there. You just got to be careful because it appears to be a think tank, and we are unaware of the aims, the underlying goals of any think tanks, really, right? Unless you, I don't know, are in the club. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you again, Bob. We really appreciate you. Please don't ever beat yourself up about this. There's no way you could have known. And Bob wanted us to leave with this idea of RF protective sleeves for cellular devices. I did a little digging. Some of them seem to be okay, but there doesn't seem to be much evidence that they're actually going to protect that much from the things that we're worried about here. So I do think the biggest takeaway is to increase that distance from your emitting device. All right, we'll be right back with more messages from you.
And we've returned, holding you in our thoughts, Bob, as well the rest of our conspiracy realists. We've got your back. With one last piece of listener mail, we are going to return to an email that made my evening. And I think it did the same for all of us. We're going to stop along the way. We're going to treat this like a little bit of a road trip. Our pal, Nobbyhood, writes in to say, fellas, hate you guys. Terrible podcast. You blokes are such a-holes. Listening to your recent listener mail episode sent me into a fun thought spiral I wanted to share. And then he talks about the light switch metaphor, which I had mentioned previously in the idea of genetic modification, how we might not know what other switches we're hitting and what other circumstances we're changing when we flip a switch. And he talks about an interview with Maynard that he heard years ago, which he linked us to, and says one of the topics they explored in the interview was the idea that all things in nature have their basis in the Fibonacci series. We all know the Fibonacci series. They went on to discuss that when there is an anomaly in nature, such as Botox, says Nobbyhood, we immediately recognize it as unnatural and know something is wrong. This is why we can spot plastic surgery from across the room. I wonder if we will be able to have the same sixth sense with people who have messed with their genetics. I want to pause there and ask you guys how you feel. Do you think genetically modified folks might trip people's spidey sense, get that uncanny valley going?
So you mean like exhibit different body language or something, or just have like a certain inhuman quality?
It depends what we changed, right?
I guess that's right. Like side effects. We're talking, that's what I'm getting at. Are we talking about some unforeseen, let's not call it consequence, but like byproduct of fixing the thing? It could cause there to be other like tells, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe something subtle. It could be any number of things, right? It really depends on what you pick at the at the genetic modification store, right? Which now in my head is like a Baskin Robbins. I don't know why. But for instance, what if there's something that changes the way people smell? You wouldn't recognize that from photographs, right? But you might get near them and it's something that could even be unconscious that trips you, right? I don't know. I mean, obviously, to your point, Matt, if someone if someone gets an extra pair of arms, that's going to stand out. You'd be like, oh, hey, man, I don't know if anybody told you this, but I think you have 4 arms. Don't make that the first thing you say in conversation. Like, get to know them.
Talk about the ear on the forehead first. That's, the elephant in the room.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, too, because we've received a lot of feedback from our fellow listeners who are talking about the acceleration of inequality, which we touched upon, that will come in an age of monetized genetic modification. But could there be some variable we don't know about, something that would somehow give non-modified human beings a Twilight Zone vibe when they run into someone that's been remixed?
The mind does jump to like zombie apocalypse stuff pretty quickly, where it's like there becomes this othered group, that like there's, so I mean, not zombie apocalypse, but just something like where there's something off about them, and there's some byproduct that you don't even know. Because you mentioned in the last bit, Ben, about how science is a series of trials, it's a series of tests, but unfortunately science and commerce are not always aligned. The science might not be quote unquote ready, but it's awesome and sellable. Therefore, let's push it out there before we fully know the long-term effects.
Mm-hmm.
Happens all the time. I mean, even with the RF conversation we were just having, it could be that down the line that science becomes crystal clear.
Mm-hmm. It's like a recent episode, which I think will have published by the time this comes out. Back in the day, when people realized the efficacy of certain substances, they didn't bother to check too deeply into possible consequences. They just said, "Hey, do your kids talk too much? Opium."
Mm-hmm. The miracle stuff, asbestos.
Mm-hmm. Are you feeling a little bit slow? Cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the advertised. What was that one, Matt? Radithor?
Yeah, Radithor.
Or Bovinine?
2 microcuries of radon.
Yes. Yes.
Something like that.
It'll micro-cure what ails you.
Well, yeah, it was guaranteed to be in each little vial, and if it wasn't in there, the creator would give you 1,000 smackaroos.
Like smack you in the face 1,000 times?
No, $1,000.
Okay, got it.
10 instances of blue cheese.
Yeah, I do believe smackaroos, where you smack someone as a form of payment, were quite common in Australia for a time. Nobby Hood,
also
let us
my
know.
favorite childhood snack.
Mm-hmm, the little smackaroos. Take that, Dunkaroos. So Nobby Hood also writes a couple of things that we just want to shout out here. We're keeping this a little bit lighter. Says, I think there may be an easy way to help cure drug addiction. Well, cure is too strong of a word. To help drug addiction, you suggested giving people free housing and drugs for those suffering from addiction. Both great ideas. As we know, says Nobby Hood, most drug addiction stems from mental health issues. If we combine free drugs and housing with real mental health care, I think we could really make a difference. All we have to do is look at the success of the criminal justice system in Holland, which has the lowest incarceration rate and the greatest rehabilitation rate for criminals, all by treating their mental health. And I believe it was Holland, right, that had to close a prison because they just didn't have a need for it. It was abandoned.
I believe that's right. It's similar to what we talked about, with the whole drugs store in Canada. I mean, when you actually treat addiction like a mental health problem instead of a crime problem, you start to see results because people can be treated for addiction. People can't necessarily be treated for being, psychopaths or career criminals. But addiction is something that can be addressed, like on a societal level. We just here in the United States seem to choose not to do that, but it's moving in that direction. It just, God, takes a long time.
I mean, healthcare still isn't really considered a human right.
No.
In the U.S., which is just, it's both cartoonish and evil, like a candy cigarette. I lifted that line from Community, but it holds up. Good. It applies. Yeah, I don't know. Matt, what do you think? Mental health, could the U.S. do a better job of addressing it? And would that lead to positive results in the world of incarceration?
Yeah, I think that was my asinine, just pulled it out of the air idea in that episode. So I concur. Let's do it.
Let's do it. But how do we do it? We want to hear from you folks. If you work in the field of mental health, For all of our fellow conspiracy realists who are not experts in the field, we would love if you could share your insight, your knowledge, and maybe bullet points of what actions the U.S. should take and how, and whether you think they will happen. We're going to sew it up on a lighter note with the last part of Nobby Hood's awesome letter, which just, again, made my evening, man. Nobby Hood says, please come to Perth. Seriously, you're dicks if you don't. My mates and I all love your show, and I'll hand out flyers, put them up in every pub, or do whatever it takes to sell at your show. Seriously. Our state, Western Australia, has the strongest economy in the world with an 8% surplus thanks to all the good stuff we take from the ground. People here are all loaded. A lot of bands have worked out that they could charge 2 to 3 times the normal ticket price for the gigs down here. I'm sure the same would apply to mediocre podcasters like yourselves, which would go a long way in paying for your trip.
I love this guy.
Yeah, happy to show you around and take you over to Rottnest on my boat to see the infamous quokkas when you come. Just friggin' come. Don't be jerks. Yours truly, your biggest fan who is mostly full of Nobby Hood.
Everybody's got a boat. Dude, when I first scanned that email, I was like, this you know, and I loved feeling completely having the, as they say in the UK, the piss taken out of me, because it really just kind of made my day. What a cool email.
Cetinix brachyrus. That's a quokka.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, quokkas are some of the most famous animals on the internet because they always look like they're in a very wholesome, good mood.
Mm-hmm. They have fire bars. Waka quokka flame.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Just so. Probably the most famous quokka in the U.S. Okay, I wanted to share that part just because, you know, we talk about some very important and often very dark, disturbing things. But we're all in this together, at least in my opinion. And we like it when people take the time and write to us like friends and tell us all this stuff. Now, we may have gotten Nobby Hood in trouble there in Western Australia because he just accused everybody there of being rich. So fellow Australians, please, you know what? Let's fire back at Nobby. Okay. We need your help, good people of Oz. Let us know the stereotypes about people from Perth. You know, let us know the trash you guys talk about Western Australia. And if you're from Western Australia, let us know parts of let us know the trash talk for other places like Melbourne.
That's the one. That's
the only one we can pronounce correctly.
Yeah. Hold on. Wait a second. She's Louise.
Adelaide.
Yeah. That's one. That's for sure one. Oh. Toronto. No,
we were so close.
I just want to go to Perth.
Mm-hmm. Perth seems like the spot. I mean, obviously, I think we're all big fans of Australian. Well, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. But also just in general, like Australian exports. You know, there's so many great bands. The culture there just seems fabulous. A really good friend that I've made through the podcast who kind of lives out in the deep bush, just absolutely, you know, her nature photography is like creatures from another planet. It's absolutely stunning, to the point where I might brave the creepy lizards and birds of it all to like go and stay with them for a week in the wilderness. Maybe I'll emerge a different person.
So let us know about Australia, folks. And you know what? Honestly, we have never visited this land, but we are persuaded it's a real place. And we would love to learn more about it and hopefully dreaming big here, actively hallucinating towards success. We will be able to get down there one day and visit everyone in person. In the meantime, tell us all about it. Tell us Australian conspiracies. Loved learning about Pine Gap. And you don't have to be Australian to write to us. Common misconception. You can contact us anywhere in the world. Now, we're going to give you a bunch of different ways to contact us. Just remember, we always read every email we get. And we're just grateful that you're here. If you're on the internet, we hang out there too.
Yeah, we're there right now. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where we have a really cool Facebook group called Here's Where It Gets Crazy. Also on YouTube, where we've got new content going up all the time, and on Twitter. You can also find us on TikTok and Instagram at the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show.
Do give us a call. 1833 stdwytk. It's a voicemail system. The voicemails can last a maximum of 3 minutes. Do use your time wisely. Give us a cool nickname, whatever you want it to be, and let us know if we can use your voice and message on the air. You can still call if you don't want it to be on the air. Just let us know. That's fine. If you don't want to do that, why not instead send us an email? We read every single one we get. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.